Hey, did you know that 67% of job seekers consider workplace diversity an important factor when considering employment opportunities? And did you also know that 50% of current employees want their workplace to increase in diversity? Listen, our world is consistently changing and expectations have increased once again, and you know that they have. The disruptors are being disrupted, and diversity has taken a vast new importance in our workplace and in our homes. The Inside View's Diversity and Inclusion Certification Program allows you to develop strategies for removing the barriers and the stereotypes, both personally and professionally. In this program, you're going to learn how to encourage diversity in your workplace, within your family, and within your community. Graduates of our program have enjoyed the highly interactive learning experience and being able to work through the real-world scenarios we've put together. We've incorporated podcasts and movies and 21st century learning tools to really allow participants to make those uncomfortable conversations comfortable. Hey, this certification will help you to understand the true meaning of diversity and inclusion and what it means to be equitable and not just equal. You'll learn to understand the definitions and the terms and the history behind diversity and inclusion. You'll learn about stereotypes and biases and about strategies to removing those barriers to really encourage a consistency when it comes to diversity and inclusion in your workplace. To gain a good understanding of cultural sensitivity, this program allows you to do that, and also how to increase market share by attracting a new diverse client. You'll learn what it takes to create the step-by-step process for your organization to avoid potential risks, both personally and professionally. This valuable diversity inclusion certification will allow you to see the world through an open lens and allow you to make decisions by looking at the world through the eyes of many. Remember, diversity is being invited to the dance, but inclusion is being asked to dance. My friends, the Inside View is looking forward to welcoming you and your team to this interactive, engaging, and timely learning experience. We can't wait to see you. We'll see you soon.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. It's so good to see people from all around the world joining us this morning. So good to see everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay, good. So my name is Deepta Rayner. I am the Senior Director of Customer Experience at the Inside View. So happy to welcome you to our very first live event on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook. So thanks to everybody who's joined us from all the different social media ways to join us. So today we are going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You'll hear a little bit about how it is linked to customer experience. And you're going to hear a lot of wonderful stories from Crystal DeCuna, our Chief Experience Officer here at the Inside View. And so let me welcome you, Crystal DeCuna. Hi, Crystal. How are you today?
Hi, Deepta. Thanks so much. Great. I'm so excited. All my social media people are probably like, my gosh, she's been talking about this for 4 or 5 days. I'm so excited to be on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live. So fantastic. Super excited. Thanks for being here, my friend.
I love being here. And Crystal, I love hearing all of your great stories. They really bring diversity, equity, and inclusion to life. Do you have a story that you can start us off with?
Hey, you know me and stories. I'm all about stories. And, this topic is such a timely topic, Deepta. I'm thrilled to dive into this today and really share. My goal for the session is to share some stories, but to start making those uncomfortable conversations a little bit more comfortable, right? You and I have had the opportunity of doing trainings like this, certification trainings over the last several months now. And one of the things that we're seeing for sure is that there's this uncomfort on making these conversations really happen, right? There's this hesitation. And so the story I'd love to start us off with is to really understand how one company is doing it really well. And so the example that I'd love to share with you is, I'll put it up on the screen right now. The example that I'd love to share with you is a company that is known and known to many. And this company is L'Oreal Cosmetics, a phenomenal brand, great company. And they've really done wonders in making sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the forefront of what they're doing. Now, they've been doing this for years, which is what I think is most exciting. L'Oreal is a Forbes top multinational performer when it comes to the beauty industry. They have presence in over 130 countries in 5 different continents. You want to talk about diversity? You want to talk about a challenge to really make sure that you're getting it right and you're as diverse, inclusive, and equitable as possible. Well, they're definitely a great example of it. And so being represented in over 130 countries and 5 continents across the globe, they've got this respect for diversity, equity, and inclusion that many don't, especially when we're talking about the small business sector, right? Is they really are able to see, years later, they've been doing this long before D&I has been a hot topic lately, but they've been really diving into this for generations before. They've made their mistakes in the past, and now they're really focused on making sure that it is part of their brand identity to be inclusive, diverse, and really, making it part of their cultural fabric. And so, their sponsors, they sponsor disability awareness workshops in India. They pair employees with multicultural students in the Netherlands. They do in Pakistan. They help young adults that are in vulnerable areas to be stronger in business and stronger in the industries that they're working in. And so these are just a few of examples that they're really making a conscious effort from a community perspective to not just sell makeup and cosmetics that we all know them for, but to really make sure that they're embedded in the fabric of their communities and keep diversity, equity, and inclusion top of mind. Worldwide, they're really known for offering a robust portfolio of diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings to their entire team. So, often as a woman of color, I'll walk into a store, and I live here in Niagara, and so often it's challenging, Deepta, to find makeup in your color. Do you ever find that? Yeah, and so sometimes that can be a little. Do you find that happens to you?
All the time.
Yeah, and I'm a makeup girl. Anybody that knows me and knows that I love makeup. And you walk into a location and you often can't find your color, but you go over to that L'Oreal section, and I tell you, they make a point to make sure that they've got every color under the sun to be able to really make a true match. So, they do these because of their pillars of principle. And what I'd love to share with you is a couple of really fun, cheeky ads they did a while back. When we're keeping diversity, equity, inclusion top of mind, gender equality comes into place. And so they did this really fun ad not too long ago. We're really showing people and showing industries that companies see a 15% increase in revenue when they have female leaders at the forefront. And so this organization, actually 69% of their leadership team, I believe, is female. So they have made that conscious effort. This was another fun one I really loved. They wanted to show that companies have seen an increase of 20% in innovation with female leaders at the table. And so, they use their brand, they use their product, they use that sexiness that comes from makeup and from their industry to really, showcase some numbers, showcase some stats. and stop traffic almost. And then this was a really fun one as well. Companies see a 24% increase in employee satisfaction with women at the leadership table. Now, Deepta, you and I know that employee satisfaction is really our game, right? That's what we talk about all the time. And so, Deepta, I'd love to know from you, when it comes to women at the table within organizations you've worked in, have you seen that connection?
Absolutely. Women bring different perspectives, different ways of approaching a situation, whether it's a strategy or a challenge that company is facing. Having that diversity at the table is so important.
Yeah, there's this level of emotional intelligence and connection that is needed when you're really trying to create employee engagement and employee satisfaction, right? And so we're customer experience experts. We dive into employee engagement and employee experience all day long, all the time. And over the last little while, though, it's really been imperative for organizations to be able to see, especially small, medium businesses, my friends. If you're a small, medium business, go ahead and tell us in the chat what type of business you're in or how many people are on your team. We'd love to know. We'd also love to know where you're from. So go ahead and tell us in the chat. But if you're a small, medium business, often it's challenging. Hey, how do I focus on customer experience? Do I focus on employee experience? Do I focus on diversity and inclusion? There's so many things to focus on when you're a small, medium business, right? And so because of that, if we can make diversity, equity, inclusion as a foundational principle within our organization, then it directly impacts your employee satisfaction and ultimately your customer satisfaction. Would you agree, Deepta?
Absolutely, Crystal. It's fundamental to moving forward in business today.
Absolutely. All right, my friends, this is our first live, so we'd love to see some activity in the chat here. Go ahead and tell us where in the world you're from in the chat. Go ahead and let us know where you're from, and we will be taking questions and comments later on. So would love to know some of your challenges in diversity and inclusion and really being able to teach and implement diversity inclusion principles within your organization. Go ahead and tell us in the chat. Go ahead and put your comments in, and we will get to them as we go through the session. So excited to dive into that. All right, Deepta, I'd like to share a little bit more about LOreal and kind of their structure. And one of the things that they've done is they've taken a massive leap to take action. But not only are they putting this action on their website and of course throughout their buildings, but this is what they practice and they eat and they live and they breathe this every day, day in and day out. And I wanted to share the words with you because I thought the words were so powerful, right? We advance diversity and inclusion in collaboration with committed teams throughout the company and the marketplace. Many of our initiatives have produced significant results recognized by independent organizations. And in our workplace, we are committed. And this is what I love the most, right? They've made this solid commitment. Now, when they bring on new team members, this commitment is a part of that, that orientation, that onboarding process. And so they're committed to fostering gender equality at every level. They're committed to welcoming people and suppliers of every culture and social background. They're enabling people with disabilities to thrive, right? To really highlight their abilities and ensuring an inclusive environment for LGBTI communities. They really wanted to make sure that this is part of their fabric. And so when they talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's more than just diversity and inclusion, but it's also about being daring and really, being inventive within their organizations, drive and aspiration, dynamic and innovation. I can't even read my own writing there. Development and individuality and dedication and involvement. They really want to make sure that these ideas are at the forefront. And so daring and invention, when everyone feels valued, they feel free to think outside the box and voice their opinions. Drive and inspiration. And so they talk about when everyone feels valued, they're motivated. Hey, we know that, right? When everybody feels valued and respected, they're motivated. And it really stimulates the best in individuals when they feel valued and respected. The next, I'm not going to mess up this word again, dynamism and innovation. When everyone feels valued, they feel free to initiate change and implement innovations. That's something that we see often in organizations, especially small, medium businesses, that, sometimes people have these exciting, new, innovative ideas, but they hold back a little bit. They hold back a little bit because they're scared of being judged. They're scared of, oh my gosh, that might cost too much money. That might take too much time up. And so these are things that hold people back a little bit, right? So anyways, I wanted to start off with that story because I think L'Oreal is doing it right. I think they're going to continue to drive forward. And I think they're going to really be able to they already do. They set a bar and a standard for other businesses to really achieve and get to. So Deepta, I hope that that kind of started us off on the right path and gave us some ideas, gave our listeners some ideas. I see we've got people from Ontario. Most of our visitors are from Ontario, Deepta, but yeah.
We've got Scola here from Nigeria.
Oh, Shola, nice to see you, my friend. I'm so glad that you're here. Shola and I are friends on Instagram. We're friends everywhere, but she runs a great customer experience account as well, and she's always sharing such high value content. Shola, it's lovely to see you. We've got Scott Johnson here as well. Scott, thanks for being here, my friend. I see Bonnie and Ashween and Aline. Thank you so much, my friends. Excited that you're all here and diving into this conversation with us. All right. What's next, Deepta?
Well, Crystal, first of all, I love that story. I love the stance that L'Oreal has taken, and I love that they've really made an effort to share their commitment with the world. I think that's so amazing. I want to ask you a little bit about the inside view. Help us understand a little bit more about your organization.
For sure. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because I really want to dive into the content of today, but would love to share a little bit about what we do and how we do it. So we're super proud to be a recognized training provider with the Canada-Ontario Job Grant. And for my Canadian friends, you may be familiar with the Canada-Ontario Job Grant, but it's a way where organizations can take certified training, and a portion of those funds can be granted by the government if they qualify. And so, we are one of the only customer experience design firms particularly focusing on small businesses to offer our customer experience mastery training. And so what we do, this is designed for leadership teams to take together. Deepta, here's the thing, even when it comes to diversity and inclusion, if you've got that one lonely champion who's championing D&I or championing customer experience or championing, employee engagement, that one lonely person, it's hard, right? You've been there. I'm sure you've been there. We've all been championing something. I remember working with a small organization here in Niagara, and I always had these out of the box ideas, and I was like that lone champion on an island by myself. And so we designed this program for leadership teams to take together so that they can be stronger together. Hey, when you train together, you stay together, right? And so it's an 8-week course. It's a certification course. And at the end of 8 weeks, they understand, this is specific for small, medium businesses. But at the end of 8 weeks, they have a solid action plan on how they're going to implement customer experience design within their organization. And in Culture Connection, which is week 3, we dive into a little bit about diversity and inclusion and equity and how that impacts their bottom line revenue as well. So it's definitely something that we're really proud of, especially being recognized across Canada is something that we take a lot of pride in. And then, of course, our diversity and inclusion certification program. That is a 2-day solid 16 hours with an additional 16 hours of follow-up. And we really allow leadership. This isn't just for leadership teams. This is for leadership teams as well as anybody in your organization. What it does is it starts to bring the conversations to the forefront, just like our training today will, but it starts to kind of, it's just to allow people to marinate in what really diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about, and how it could impact your bottom line in your organizations. Companies want to grow right now. Hey, we're getting out of a global pandemic. Hopefully we're getting out of it soon. And one of the biggest challenges organizations have is, increasing market share and increasing becoming more diverse, increasing customer satisfaction, and all those good numbers. And diversity, equity, and inclusion plays a direct impact on that. So excited to dive into, excited to be a part of the Canada Ontario Job Grant, because that took a while to get approved and ready for that. And so we're proud of that for sure.
Hi. So Crystal, can you tell us, there's a lot of small, medium sized businesses that I speak to on a daily basis. And one of the questions they ask is, how do you kickstart diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts being a small or medium sized business?
Yeah, and I mean, this is such a great question because, and this is really what I wanted to dive into today, because I think, it's not easy. Deepti, I'm sure you'd agree that these are uncomfortable conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had been talking to a company just the other day, and what was one of that objections that came up when they were talking about it?
Yes. The objection I heard was, well, we are very close to our employees. We are very close to our customers, which many small, medium-sized businesses are. They have that luxury of being so close to their customers, even when, they may not be customer facing all the time. And so what do you say to that? Like, they say, you know what, we're really close. We don't need diversity and inclusion here. We're good. We know what we're doing. We've got a handle on this.
Yeah, I see that often. I see it all the time. And yeah, the objection is really, we don't have a problem, right? But their business is doing well. They're online. Some of them are SaaS companies, or some of them are online businesses. Some are, local businesses that maybe have up to 100 employees that have been working there for a long time, that have a lot of tenure and a lot of longevity within their organizations. And so, the question is, if it's not broken, why fix it? Well, right? I mean, that's really it. Crystal, it's not broken. We're making money. Things are good. What do we need to do to change or to fix it? Everything is working. And hey, kudos to you if it's working and the culture feels great, and that's fantastic. That's what we want for every business. But what I would challenge some of these organizations to really do is to really ask the question on, is it the best it can be? Right? You might be comfortable right now. Numbers are good. We're, again, pandemic, we're doing okay. We've kept our team. Our team is long tenured. But is it the best that's possible within their organization, right? Can we elevate our organizations to be stronger together and even more powerful and impact more people? And so, a couple of ideas I would love to share with the audience today, and please go ahead and tell us, ask us in the chat, or give me your feedback as I go through these. But the number one thing, Deepti, I'd love to share is, we need to start to evaluate our current diversity, equity, and inclusion status, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I know you come from the banking industry, pre-Inside View, and evaluating that status. Deep, tell me a little bit about maybe how that might have gone in that big company. I'd love to hear a little bit about that, and then I'll share how that could happen in the small world.
Yeah, so in a large organization, there are employee surveys that happen all the time, as well as when you're onboarding. So there are some questions that they ask if you would like to self-identify as one of these groups, and they're the typical, are you a visible minority? Are you Indigenous? Do you have a non-visible diversity issue, right? Like neurodiversity, for example. Yep. And so there's a handful of things that they ask, but as you know, diversity and inclusion covers so many different categories, from gender to gender identity, right? And we even saw on on the latest census in Canada, they asked about gender identity. I thought that was fantastic, but it's just a start, right? At least we're moving in the right direction to ask the questions. But in a smaller company, I'm wondering if everybody feels comfortable identifying. And I know of certain, I've been in many situations where people don't even want to reveal what country they're from.
Yeah.
And so because they don't feel it's safe, even though they know it won't impact their role.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's such a great point. And so yeah, so number one is to really evaluate that current diversity, equity, and inclusion status within your organization. But for a small, medium business, I think it's important when you've got a team. Deepta, we deal with so many organizations that have teams of about 30 people. That's really kind of our ideal niche, is we deal with organizations with anywhere from 30 to about 300. But you know, that small business we love to work with because they're agile and they can change and they can, you know, they're willing to change. And so understanding and evaluating that diversity inclusion is easy within a small, medium business if you take the initiative to authentically do it. And so number one, you know, in our customer experience world, we use a lot of tools, but voice of employee and voice of customer data, I think, is really critical here. And so the voice of employee data, you know, it's not something that we can gather this data, you know, 6 months ago and then use it a year later, which is what we see often within organizations where the data is gathered before, but then, you know, it's sitting on somebody's desk, right? It's sitting on somebody's desk, gathering dust, and not necessarily being used. And so we love to be able to incorporate focus groups within organizations. But the thing is, I always say, before we are ready to evaluate that current D&I status, we need to have somebody in place to make the good stuff happen. So to action the results is what I want to say. Is as soon as we identify what those challenges and strengths are, we need to have somebody in place, not even somebody, but you know, time, money, and resources in place to action what we learn. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we find, especially in small, medium organizations. In larger organizations, we might have somebody spearheading the whole thing. We might have a team spearheading the whole thing. And so it's a lot easier. But when you talk about a small, medium business, which is where our passion is, it's really about saying, you know what, before we even start to ask, we want to make sure that somebody is in place with the time, with the money, with the resources to action what we learn. And then the other part of evaluating your status is really understanding that the voice of employee, I believe, is at the forefront than the voice of the customer, in my personal opinion, right? We want to be able to ask our employees you know, how comfortable they are and where we can improve and what we can do to make their jobs even better and more successful. We really want to be able to start from the inside out. That's actually why we call the company The Inside View. Deepta, is because we wanted to make sure that the inside working was really good. It's just like our human bodies, right? We got to take care of ourselves on the inside before we can be better for anybody else. The same goes with a successful organization. We need to make sure that we're good on the inside, that team is like, we're cultivating a culture of success consistently with our team so that they can impact that broader voice of customer data that we'll gather. The other thing too is surveys are often, you know, the kind of the one that everybody knows. Let's do a survey, and okay, you know what? There's some phenomenal companies out there that do surveys really well. Customerville is one of my favorites. They do a really great job on making a survey interactive and fun and just like visually beautiful. But there's hundreds out there, and we use many of them. For voice of employees data, we love Office Vibe. It's a Canadian company, woo woo, but they're a really great resource as well. But I also love focus groups. Focus groups, we've had an opportunity to do a lot of focus groups, especially during the pandemic virtually. And focus groups give us such deep, rich data that really allow us to be able to action the emotions behind the behaviors, behind the statistics, right? So we can identify really how somebody's feeling on the inside and how that's directly impacting that business bottom line. So the focus groups, you know, we do them several different ways, but it's not just a survey, because surveys are going to ask you those 5 or 10 questions that are black and white, right, Deepta? You've seen how many? You've probably designed hundreds of surveys, but you know that with focus groups, right, you're pulling out this information that they might not tell you unless you ask. right? And you might be asking questions based on somebody's behaviors and based on somebody's physical responses. And so the questions can get really nice and deep and really rich. And so that's number one. I know we spent a long time on number one, but that's number one.
Well, I was going to say too, Crystal, that when you involve a third party to actually engage the focus group, you get to sometimes different feedback than if the company was to organize that focus group on their own.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? There's a level of confidence. There's a level of confidence employees have that can be shaken or can be strengthened. And when an organization is doing them internally, hey, listen, like, it's uncomfortable. You're not going to be as open and transparent if things are not as great as you would hope them to be. If the dialogue is happening internally, it's, there's this roadblock that goes up or this wall that goes up that says, well, if I say the wrong thing, I might lose my job. If I say the wrong thing, I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be the squeaky wheel. Hey, it's happened to me hundreds of times within organizations that, you're uncomfortable to say certain things. But if it's a third party, and they can assure that it's confidential, and they can assure that, their feedback is going to be marinated within, other feedback, and a company is really willing to take that lens off and say, you know what, we're willing to be vulnerable and we're willing to learn, then I think it can go, really be a powerful tool. The main point there, though, is that a company needs to be vulnerable. And we often see within organizations, somebody will say, well, I know who said that. I know who said that. And I'll say, no, you don't. You really don't, right? You really don't know who said it. And it's not about trying to figure out who said it and who didn't. Are you ready to be vulnerable? Are you ready to really understand and really listen to learn and listen to understand and not just listen to hear and to judge and to be, pointing fingers at who said it and that person? That's not the point of a focus group by any means, especially in small, medium organizations, which is where we see the biggest challenge with this. I see the chat going off in all of our platforms. Let's get into a couple more, Deepta, and then I will, I'm happy to take some of these really, really great questions. So let's get into the second one. I'd like to share, the second way that businesses can kickstart diversity, equity, inclusion efforts within their organization is to really keep it simple and follow your typical SWOT analysis. Hey, every organization I know, Deepta, I mean, we've been using SWOT for what, years? Yeah, and it doesn't matter sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and it works. It's simple and it works.
It's simple. It works. We've been using it for years. I think there's layers of this SWOT that we can use. And for those of you who don't know a SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Great opportunity for you to have within your organization hey, let's just open up this can of worms. Let's put it up on a big board or a virtual board if you're doing your meetings virtually now. We use a lot of different platforms to kind of do like virtual like a virtual conversation where they can put their notes and their thoughts on there and identify, hey, what are the strengths that our organization has in diversity, equity, inclusion? What are the weaknesses that we have in diversity, equity, inclusion? What are the opportunities and what are the threats in each? And so what I would do with this, if you're a small, medium business and you really you don't know where to start with this, I would do an open invitation, especially to your leadership team, but I'd really encourage your entire organization to be a part of this conversation. Diversity, equity, inclusion is not just a leadership conversation. I think that's what the biggest challenge is also, is that often it's like, well, the leaders have to meet, the leaders have to make the decision, and the leaders have to funnel it down. Hey, the leaders need to be included in the conversation, but it's not just about the leaders. It's really about listening and learning from everybody within the organization. So to kickstart, a SWOT, if you're doing it virtually, give them some time. Give them a little bit of time, maybe a week or a couple of days, to say, hey guys, let this marinate. What are the strengths within our organization when it comes to this topic? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats? But give them some time to really let it marinate and say, come to this meeting. We've put a couple of hours aside. This is what we do with organizations all the time. And we've put meetings, we've put some time aside, and your opinion matters. What you say really matters. And we've got people ready and willing to take action on what you are going to present to us. So we would really love your honest, authentic, transparent opinion on what our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats are. And we promise you in return that we're going to take action on it. Right? Like that's what they want to hear, that they want to feel valued and respected. And you have to value and respect what they're saying. So that's a simple method, but definitely something that organizations can do to kickstart it. And this is organizations that think that they don't have a problem. This is one of those things in particular. Let's start. Maybe you don't, but that'll come up through the SWOT, right? Maybe you don't have a challenge. I beg to differ, but maybe you don't. And if you don't, then it'll come up. You know, your strengths will outweigh your weaknesses, and you'll see it.
So you make a really good point there, Crystal. And I think even for us who are talking about diversity and inclusion on a daily basis, we're always learning something new almost every day. And so it's really important to keep that open mind about what your teammates or your colleagues or your reports have to say about how your organization is doing and what can you do better. There's always something new and there's always something changing.
Always, like consistently, right? Consistently something's changing. And hey, like our whole world has changed in the last 2 years. Our entire world has completely flipped upside down with this global pandemic. And so, you know, it's beautiful that it's brought diversity, equity, inclusion to the forefront. Deepta, we've been training this for over 6 years. But I'll tell you, it didn't take flight those first 4.5 years as strongly as it is now. Right? There was very few organizations interested. And here's the thing is that without putting these D&I practices into place, without taking the initiative and having the courage to kind of, you know, unleash or open up that can of worms, it's going to start costing companies a lot of money, right? In the wrong way. And so we really want to be able to continue to say, hey, listen, right now your organization has a lot of great opportunity. We want to look back 5-10 years from now and say we were an organization a part of this change. We were an organization that did it, that was the disruptor, right? Well, that was the one that took the initiative to kind of move forward on this. Deepta, I can't help but take a look at some of this chat going on. My friend Mandisa is here. Hey, Mandisa from Cape Town, South Africa. Mandisa, I'm so excited that you're here and with us. Thank you so much, my friend. Should we take, actually, let me do one more and then let's take some questions. Sound good?
Yeah. So, Crystal, I wanted to say that it could be that your internal team is very diversity aware. What about customers and what's the connection?
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And are your customers feeling like I right now am consciously choosing to do business with organizations that are or are not diverse, right? And when I say diverse, it's not about black and white. It's really about just you know, diversity is such a big spectrum, but I'm looking at their Instagram feeds. I'm looking at their website. I'm listening to how they communicate with their staff. I'm reading the words on their websites and on their you know, billboards or ads or whatever it might be. I'm reading into the company, and it's perception, right? It's perception. If they might be doing things on the back end, but if they're not showing me that as an organization, this is at the forefront of what they do, then I'm going to keep looking. It just happened the other day, actually, with a makeup brand. You know, I started my day off talking about makeup, and actually it was a skincare brand. And if you're watching, then you'll know the story I'm talking about. She actually does follow me on social media, so she might be tuning in today. But I reached out to her because I wanted new skincare. I thought, okay, let me find out about some new skincare, and I reached out to her on social media. And I've been really wanting to try this brand of skincare because the results are really great, and you know, I'm all about taking care of my skin. And I was on the website, and there was not one before and after picture or results picture that had any women of color. First of all, it was just women, and I think it's important that it should be gender equal when it comes to skincare and that as well. So that was one thing that stood out to me. The second thing was I'm a woman of color. I have melanin in my skin, and not every product will react and respond the same way. And I didn't know if her product would suit me. And so I asked. I went down to almost a year in her Instagram feed, and there was not a picture to be seen. Instagram and on her website and on her Facebook, there was not a picture to be seen that had a woman of color. And so I thought, oh, maybe this isn't right for my skin. So I reached out because I thought maybe it should be, but let me ask. And she messaged me about 50 different pictures. She goes, Crystal, I'm so sorry. I don't have it on my feed, but many of my colleagues do. And let me share some pictures with you. And she shared multiple pictures with me of it. And so it was interesting because it was a realization for her that, it's just an unconscious bias, a complete unconscious bias. She didn't do it intentionally. It was just something that not in her world. She might not have a lot of women of color that are her clients. Maybe she does. But I think that was an interesting unconscious bias that kind of was, and it happens all the time. That's just one company, but there's several, like that nobody. A lot of people don't do it intentionally, but the intention now has to be that conscious change needs to happen. And that goes in part with my next point, which is, we need to educate our staff so that they know the language of diversity and inclusion, right? That they understand what it means to really speak the lingo. What does unconscious and conscious bias really mean? What is the difference between diversity, equity, inclusion, cultural sensitivity? There's so much language. And I remember when I first started my career in the home building industry, it was, I came from a retail background for 15 years and I transitioned into construction. Like, what was I thinking? And I remember going into a board meeting or an executive meeting once, and I wrote down like a million different words that they were saying. They were saying cantilever and soffit and this and that and all these construction words that I had never even bought a house before that. And so, they were having this great, robust dialogue, and I was writing down all the words I didn't understand. And there must have been, there was dozens of words I did not understand. I went back to my desk, I started Googling them, started making sense of all of it because it was a completely different language. And one of my first orders of business that I did was I created a glossary of terms. Because the team that I was working with, phenomenal team, super educated in the industry, but they were so educated on the industry that they didn't even realize that somebody new doesn't know that language, right? And so I wanted to make sure that every new team member I brought on board knew the language. So I created a glossary of terms with the simplest things, and that glossary of terms helped to educate the next 17 people that joined us because they were really understanding of this language of construction. And so I think that's the same applies for diversity and inclusion. There's a language out there that people need to learn and be taught. And, we do that with our training programs as well. We really dive into some of those conversations. All right, Deepta, shall we take a couple questions and then I'll get into some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion definitions, if that works?
Absolutely. So there's someone joining us from Leverage U TV, and Yay! They asked us, what do you say to companies who claim to already be diverse? How do you help them become aware of the difference between diversity and inclusion?
Ooh, thank you so much, Leverage U TV. This is my this is Julie Christensen from Leverage U. Thanks for being here, Julie. I appreciate you so much, my friend. This is a really great question, and I see this very often. Is they already claim to have that we have a lot of women. Actually, there was an organization I worked with, and there were about 100 people, and they said, well, we don't have an issue when it comes to diversity and inclusion. I remember bringing this up, and I said, this was probably about 7-8 years ago, I brought it up. And we don't have a problem. Our lawyer is Jewish and our other lawyer is East Indian. And we have a banker who is from the Caribbean. So we don't have a diversity, equity, and inclusion challenge. And so that, that came up. And I walked away from that meeting saying, I didn't know what to do, right? I didn't really know what to do at that point because it was so, it was disheartening to me that you really thought that you didn't have a challenge. And so, Julie, your question is so timely, because I think it's about the numbers. I hate to say it that way, because, in customer experience, the numbers are secondary. It's emotions that really drive the behaviors. But when it comes to diversity inclusion, when a lot of organizations can start to see the impact D&I practices have on their numbers, then that's where we kind of might hit a chord. And we did hit a chord in certain organizations with that, where we're saying, I asked what their biggest challenge is. Oh, my biggest challenge is, hiring. Right now, everybody's having a challenge hiring top talent, or, sales. Well, let's talk about that for a second. If you're having a challenge hiring top talent, could it be that you're not attracting top talent? Could it be that you're not attracting diverse, because your environment is not attractive to a diverse sector of people, that you're not using language and being in the places and representing your company through, if you're just posting on one platform that is predominantly, Caucasian, then you might only get that. But if you start to post and widen your search to make sure that you are inclusive, then you'll start to see a strength in hiring, because you're opened up your market, right? And the same would apply for your customer base. If your challenge is sales, well, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at your social media feeds and your marketing strategy. And are you including diverse consumers? Because, hey, there's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of people that come from diverse backgrounds that are only willing to do business with organizations that support that. So I hope that answers your question. Julie, I think I would start with the numbers and work backwards from there.
Can I add to that, Crystal, that you may think that you're diverse because you can see diversity, but not all diversity are things that you can see. So there's neurodiversity, there's diversity of thought. I was on one team where we always assigned one person to be the devil's advocate, right? Just to have that, so you're not going ahead with groupthink in a strategic plan, for example. And so there are many kinds of diversity that you cannot see. So that, I think, is really important to acknowledge as well when you're speaking with companies that claim to already be diverse.
Yeah, great point. Great point. We have people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. We have people from different religions and race. I mean, it's just it's not a color thing. I always say that, right? It's not just about the color of our skin, my friends. This diversity, equity, inclusion runs so much deeper. And we have to be aware of how deep and in what factors and in what areas as well. Awesome. Let's take another question, and then we can keep moving forward. Thanks for the question, Julie.
So your friend Shola is asking about Indigenous businesses in Nigeria don't take this into consideration. Reason being that the workforce is not diversified in terms of nationality. So we just talked about that a little bit, but do you want to address it further?
Sure. So the question, sorry, what is the actual question?
So I think the question is, hopefully Shola will confirm on the chat, but I think it's that in Nigeria, when she's talking about Indigenous businesses in particular, the workforce is not diversified in terms of nationality, right? So they don't necessarily have the diversity that we would have in Toronto, for example, where there are many different nations coming together as one population. And so do you want to just elaborate a little bit on those non-national diversities?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually, Shola. Thank you for bringing that up, because we see in the Western world, diversity and inclusion is a hot topic right now. But the reality is, we've got colleagues in Nigeria, we've got colleagues all over the globe. And it's not necessarily that big of a challenge in a lot of areas in the globe. And when I say that it's not that big of a challenge, it might not be that big of a challenge at the forefront, but there is that underlying thing. If they want to be able to reach global markets, there is kind of that underlying challenge. And so Shola, to your point, I think it's about really making sure that you're inviting people to the table. So, with the power of our virtual world now, invite colleagues from different countries to be a part of the conversation. Invite people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different religions, different races, different abilities, different neuro abilities, to be a part of those conversations. So, often I say with organizations, invite your customers, right? Invite the people that you're targeting, because when you start to ask, one of the things that we did was with a client, we said, hey, let's put it on social media and say, listen, we're trying to listen and learn. And if you're one of our clients, or if you're connected with us in some way, shape, or form, we would love to hear from you, because we've got some questions on how our product or service could better suit you. And put it out there on social media, and you'll start to identify, well, who your customer base is, and if they believe that you can do better, right? And so you'll start to ask the opinion of them. I don't know if that answers your question, but I would put it out to that. I would also, Shola, maybe get involved in some other business groups, global business groups, because global business groups have global perspectives, right? And so you're able to say, if you're selling a product or service, but you really want it to be able to be a product or service that appeals to the global market, then get those global perspectives. But I will also say, here in Niagara, there's a lot of small businesses that only want to do business within our core, right? And so that might be the case in your case as well. You might only want to do business with a certain sector of people. And if that's the case, then those are the people that we want to ask, right? So sometimes we don't necessarily need to ask others. We just need to ask those in our sector. But within your sector, there's layers and layers and layers of diversity right within your ideal target. So I hope that answers your question. Feel free to add in there, and I'm happy to touch on it some more. Any others, or shall we keep going?
Sorry, let's keep going.
That's okay. That's okay. Great. Okay, perfect. So let's dive into some of the definitions. Now, this is, anybody can Google definitions. It's not rocket science, but I wanted to share this with you because I think sometimes there's a little bit of misunderstanding when it comes to some of the definitions. I wonder if we can blow this screen up a little bit more so people can read this. But let's talk about diversity. So diversity in particular, it means to have a range of people with various racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, and cultural backgrounds and various lifestyle experiences and interests. So it's really widespread, right? Diversity is really ensuring that you're having a multifaceted look at your challenge. It means understanding that each individual is unique and recognizing our individual differences. That's diversity. So when we dive into inclusion, my friends, it's a little bit different. So if diversity is making sure that there's multiple people around that table, or multiple people within your business, or multiple people within your, your customer base, then inclusion means that all the people, regardless of their abilities, their disabilities, their healthcare needs, socioeconomic backgrounds, whatever the case might be, regardless of their background, they're respected, appreciated, and they're valued members of that community, and their opinion matters, right? And so there was an organization I was involved with a while back, and they said, Crystal, we want you because we want your diverse opinion, and we really want to make sure that we're growing, we're attracting small, medium businesses within a diverse background, and so they really engaged me, and I was excited to be the first woman of color to really be a part of that type of organization, and really make change. And 2 years later, anytime I had brought up, things and ways that we can be more inclusive as an organization, the people around the table were not very inclusive. My opinion was not, it just wasn't accepted the way I hoped it would be, and there was never any change. And so 1.5 years later, I made a conscious decision to exit. And being really vocal about why I exited, because it was great that you had diversity at the table, but I wasn't there just to be a a person that looked different at the table. I was there to actually create some inclusion, create some change and transition within the organization. And so, we want to make sure that it's one thing to bring them to the table. It's another thing to really involve them in the conversation. So when you think about that, in inclusion, you may check off some boxes if you're a small, medium business because, we've got somebody of color, we've got somebody with a disability. This is not what this is about, my friends. This is about making sure that you're including them and you're inviting them to the conversation and that their opinion is valued and highly respected so that you're able to, as an organization, make real, authentic change. The last one I want to dive into is cultural sensitivity. Sometimes referred to as cross-cultural sensitivity or simply cultural awareness. It's knowledge, awareness, and acceptance of other cultures and other cultural identities. I was driving down the street the other day, and I'm so excited that I see a really multicultural. There's a lot of houses up for sale in Niagara. It's a hot housing market right now, and so you see the realtor signs. And for the first time in my life, I'm like, wow, like what a diverse group of realtors that we've got here in Niagara. There's so many new cultures that are, helping to create home ownership here in Niagara. And it's funny, though, when you see somebody, somebody I know very well, and I know his real name, and then I see the name that he put on the sign. And I said, that's not his name. I know who he is. And I called him on it. I said, why'd you change your name? He goes, oh, Crystal, it's just easier for people to call me by that name. And I said, but that's not your name. And he says, I know, it's just, I said, and you love your name because his name is beautiful. And so, we just had a conversation about it. And he said, it's just easier for me that way. And it's unfortunate that we still live in a society where so many people are doing that. Right? So many people have to do that. And so cultural sensitivity, there's so many facets to this, but that's just one area. Hey, we know that hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people will change their name on a resume and get a phone call, where when their name is difficult to pronounce, they don't get a phone call. I also get this often when we're doing training sessions is, Crystal, we talk about communication often, and I'll get somebody might say something like, because I couldn't understand them, they didn't speak English. And I say, okay, tell me more about that. Well, they were, from India, and I don't think that they could speak English properly. And I said, okay, so tell me more about it. What was it that you were well, they were saying this, but they were, I couldn't understand them. And I said, well, let me share with you, the reality is English is actually their first language in India. And if they're here and they're in Canada and they're speaking to you, perhaps we just need to change our communication style a little bit. Perhaps we might need to slow down how we're speaking. It's an accent. It's not that they can't speak English. It was an accent. And so I think it's really important to be aware of cultural sensitivity is, if somebody has a British accent, we might be more inclined to listen a little bit harder and to maybe, really respect it and say it's beautiful. Yet somebody with a different ethnic background, sometimes that accent is actually frowned upon. And I think, that's not right. That's where the cultural sensitivity comes in, is take a moment to, maybe speak a little clearer, speak a little slower, listen a little better. And that's how we're going to be able to start to, remove these barriers and these walls. And also remove the frustration. When your staff is taught how to communicate and how to listen with intention and respect somebody's beautiful culture, that's when change starts to happen. But often, entry level or frontline customer facing staff aren't trained on that. Right. And they get frustrated when they can't hear, and they get frustrated when they don't understand. But, it's about having a level of empathy that often requires training. All right, I could talk about that forever. Let's get into another definition, Deepta. So one of the questions we often get is, Crystal, what's the difference between equality and equity? And I think this is a really great example of a photo that's been all over the internet lately. Equality is where everybody has that same they've all been given that equal opportunity to make the most out of their lives and their talents. But equity is understanding that some people need a little bit more. Some people need that extra help. Some people need whether it's a disability, whatever the case may be, but there's a different level of need for each individual. And equity is about making sure that everybody can see over this fence. It's not just about, the opportunity that you're given, but making sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to see the fence. But there's also another great diagram that I love to share. And it takes equity and equality even further. And so if you take a look at inequality, this first image here, inequality, access to opportunities, so that, those opportunities just keep dropping in their lap. And we know that there's particular demographics that this happens for, right? Where opportunities easily come to them because of their perhaps, family background, or socioeconomic class, or just diversity in gender and diversity in education. And we know that those opportunities just kind of come. And then you've got equality, where evenly distributed tools and assistance. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner there in that image, where both people have a ladder, but that tree is still leaning towards one side, right? That person still has that extra little bit of benefit from being able to get those apples. And then in the top right-hand corner, it's okay, wait a minute, there's, now we can see that one person needs a taller ladder to pick from. They need a bit more help. And so we give that to them. But you can still see that the tree on that right side doesn't have as many apples on it. Right? There's not that many opportunities. And the most valued one I see at the bottom there is the justice. This is where we start to make real change. This is where we start to fix we fix it. We start to fix it. And, within small, medium organizations, I think this is so important to understand, guys, we got to fix it. We got to fix the challenge, because whether we see it or not, it's there. And so we have to start to figure out, what does equal look like? What does equality really look like within our organization? Deepta, feel free to chime in on this conversation, because I know you're just as passionate about this as I am. But, what within your small business, you've got a team of, let's say, 5, 10, 50, 100 people. We have to identify how to straighten that tree. First of all, we have to identify, is the tree crooked? Is it leaning towards one side? Do certain people in your organization, and hey, I've experienced this many times, where the tree was definitely leaning towards one particular person. So no matter what I did, no matter how much I championed a cause, no matter how successful and how many awards I was winning and how many houses we were selling, or whatever the success was, there were certain people in the organization that did get that upper hand, and they did have those stronger opportunities. And so it's the injustice that we need to be able to kind of fix within organizations, in particular small, medium businesses. I think that's really the key. Deepta, I'll let you chime in. I know you're passionate about this topic too.
I love this image, and it looks like Mandisa is a big fan as well. When I saw this image, I mean, I've seen this image many, many times, but today when I looked at it, I was actually thinking about a new employee versus an experienced employee, right? Absolutely. And we do a lot of work to onboard someone who's new. We give them training. We help that. We don't just stick them under the tree to pick the apple. We give them the tools, right? Yeah. And knowing their situation, we might have to give them that bigger ladder. And so it's all about asking those important questions up front. For a new employee to say, what supports do you need? How do I need to accommodate you? And I know from my perspective, one of the things that I had to be accommodated for is that I'm not very tall. So I needed some ergonomic support when I got my new desk at every job, right? Or I had to take my chair with me wherever I went throughout an organization. And but that was a support that really helped me do my job well when I was sitting at my desk and not get into carpal tunnel or all of those other things. And so I think it's really important that you can look at this in so many different ways, and in terms of what equity and justice can mean.
For sure, for sure. And I'd love to hear from some of the people watching, where do you feel, do you feel like your organization, where do you fall on this map? And feel free to be transparent and vulnerable. And if not, that's okay too. But where do you think your organization might sit on this map? And it's okay, because the reality is, I think a lot of us are in the inequality, and I don't think that's wrong. I think we just need to identify that we're there. Once we can identify that we're there, or maybe we're not, maybe there is, another sector that you're in, but I think it's really important to just let's take the blinders off.
So I'm looking at the comments. I don't see any coming through right now, Crystal. So I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I love the power of live.
So maybe we can pose another question, which is, what is one change you would like to see start happening in your organization when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and equity? So maybe that's another question that people might want to tackle. And Crystal, is there something in particular for you and your organization that you would like to tackle?
For sure. So, Deepta, I'll address this, and please go ahead, my friends, and share in the chat. I know many of you might come from a consulting background, and maybe it's not your particular organization, but organizations that you work with. So please go ahead and share in the chat with us, because it'll help us to really direct the rest of this conversation. But, if there was one thing that I would say, Deepta, that I'd love to see happening within organizations, it's really identifying the hiring practices. Mm-hmm. And are we attracting the talent that is diverse? Are we attracting them? Are we appealing to them? Are we so let me change that a bit. So when I talk about top talent, and I talk about this in our customer experience mastery program a lot, we dive into top talent all the time. If we have a need to hire top talent, everybody wants to hire the best person. And we've recently brought some people on our team, and we've got, some really, really great talent in our team. And so if you're hiring top talent, it's really important to identify that when we're hiring top talent, we want to be able to, I see a little background there. When we're hiring top talent, we really want to make sure that they have an expectation of us. Top talent has an expectation of us. If we have an expectation of them that they're going to perform their job, outstandingly, they're going to be the best that we pick, they're going to be the one, well, they're picking us as well. And so it's really important for them to be able to, they've got a standard expectation of what we are doing and what how we're going to be treating and valuing them. And so when you put that diversity, equity, and inclusion layer on top of that, I think it's even more important to identify, how are we attracting, onboarding, hiring, welcoming, and retaining that top talent, because people are choosing right now the companies they want to work with. They're being very clear and very specific. I recently had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and she's looking for a new opportunity. And I said, listen, I want you to make a list. I want you to make a list of the top 10 companies you'd like to work for. And she says, oh, and she said, right away, she started spewing off a couple of companies. I said, okay, well, I know your values. I know your character. I know things that are important to you. And so I want you to take a look at this list again and align it with your personal values, your personal lifestyle, your personal character, your core values. And if you can align a company that you'd like to work with those core values and who you are as an individual, then your top 10 list might change. And so once you pick that top 10 list, then start approaching, right? Start approaching and start having those conversations. So I think for small, medium businesses, it's really important for them to look at their hiring, onboarding, welcoming, that whole top talent piece that we talk about in CX Mastery, which is really, diving into keeping your people, right? Keeping the team happy, keeping them engaged. If you want top talent, you got to work hard to keep them engaged. Like top talent is going to get, they don't want to be around an organization that's not committed to excellence and committed to seeing them grow and develop and be better, right? Would you agree, Deepta?
Absolutely. Now, Crystal, we actually have quite a few comments now that I'd love to go through a few of them.
Yes, yes.
So
Go ahead.
Shola is asking, I'd like to see a scenario where employees are allowed to contribute more in decision making. And I know coming from larger organizations, it's a different dynamic. And there's often a top down and a bottom up that happens. And then, strategies and decisions kind of get made in the middle. What about smaller and medium-sized organizations?
So the question is, I'd like to see a scenario where employees are allowed to contribute more in the decision-making process. So, Shola, that's exactly what we train. Mm-hmm. We train that because it's so important. I think often organizations work in such silos, Shola, where, people, there's that leadership team and then there's a customer-facing team. And I have to say, like, one of the keys to my success over the years, whether it was in retail or construction or any industry that I've worked in, I never wanted to sit in the office. Like, it was not my thing. I wanted to be in the field. And if one of the scenarios I use is, it's kind of like basketball. If you've played basketball, they score in the paint. They don't score from outside the paint. You score when you're in the paint. And as a leader in an organization, our goal as a leader is not to make the schedule and to order things. Our goal as a leader is to design an environment that engages, excites. In our world, we say ignite, excite, and delight. Our goal as a leader is to create an environment where your employees are going to thrive, get excited, get ignited, and be delighted, right? And that's really our goal as a leader. And so when you make that your goal to ignite, excite, and delight, or whatever the case may be, but really to make sure that you're playing in the paint, then that involves you going to your front line and including them in that decision-making process, right? And so there is a level of vulnerability. There's a level of vulnerability that leaders need to have, Shola, to be able to do that. And again, I'm going to bring this right back to the numbers. For them to be able to see the innovation, the ideas, sometimes it's one of the things we did was we said, okay, we want every leader in the organization to spend a day at one of our locations. And so they were able to see some of the challenges firsthand that some of the frontline team was having. And they were easy fixes. There was a company, one of the locations didn't have a microwave that was working. And so they had to leave the store. They had to go to the food court. They had to use the microwave in the food court. I don't even know if those are going to exist in a pandemic world anymore, but they did back in the day, which just a few years ago. They had to go heat up their lunch, eat in the food court, and then walk all the way back. And so that made them a little bit late for their shift, for their lunch, coming back from their lunch break. It caused frustration because they had less time to eat because they had to go back and forth. Something so little, so minor. But until that leader came to the back room and saw that was happening, he bought an $89 microwave before he left. Right. And so just little tiny dynamics of the leaders being involved in that front line allow them to see how important the front line's opinion is in the decision-making process. So, if I can, I would encourage leaders to start removing that differentiator between leader and team member and start opening those lines of communication. One of the tools we love to use, Shola, to do this is journey mapping. I know you're familiar with it. Anybody in the customer experience world is very familiar with this tool. But we like to journey map the employee experience. It's actually one of the first maps we do with organizations is mapping that employee experience. And we map it from sometimes even a year or 6 months before they're ever an employee. Where are they? What are they doing? What are their emotional, what are their emotional triggers that they have that we might be able to help and contribute to creating that connection before they're on our team. What do the first 6 months look like? What do the next year look like? What do the first 21 days look like? Like we do it in chunks. And so we're able to really understand that employee experience. And when we're able to understand it from a leadership looking at it first, then we invite the rest of the frontline team in to be a part of that journey mapping process. And when they're a part of that journey mapping process, you're really able to identify their emotional experience throughout the journey. But what's even cooler about that is that the leadership can really start to see how, they have one vision of it. And until they can get the employee's vision of it, it changes, right? It changes. There's a great book out there. I think I've got it behind me. Where is it? Driven to Delight. Driven to Delight. It's about Mercedes-Benz's story and how they've used journey mapping to really maximize their employee and their customer experience. And they had a journey map up there. Don't quote me. I think it's got to be a couple of months, maybe 8 months. They had a couple of journey maps up in war rooms, and they continued to invite their team from every level, like from janitorial team to the senior executives, to be a part of that journey map and give their opinion. So it really helped them design an experience that's certainly driven to delight. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Crystal.
Have I been talking for a whole hour and 15 minutes, Deepta? Oh my gosh.
We've got a lot of more questions here, so I think let's tackle a few more. So Leverage You says, my private practice is looking to hire new independent contractors, and we have a wish list of diversity for our team. That's awesome.
I love that. Julie, your team is so fantastic. I love that. If I could give any insight into that, I would really recommend you taking a look at, so the supplier diversity is a really great community to kind of look into, right? So that you're understanding different genders, different, different supplier diversity. But also, taking a look at different cultural communities. So, whether it's within our Niagara region, I know you operate in Niagara, the different cultural communities, but also even the different communities of mental health, of LGBTQ communities, really posting your job in those locations, because that's where they are, right? If we're just posting on one platform, then you're just going to get those clients that are typically on that platform. But when you want to consciously make an effort to hire and change up your diversity practices, then that should be part of your process to appeal to a broader audience and go to them. So I hope that helps. But well done, Julie. I know that's a priority for you and your organization. When you're leading the way, my friend, you're definitely leading the way.
Juliette Dunn has a great comment. She wants to have more diversity on her board of directors. And Juliette, if I recall, you're in the Niagara region, yes? I know in Toronto, there is an organization called Diversity on Board that was started by Maitrey Foundation. And they specifically are looking for people of diversity to join boards. So there's like a whole program that maybe you can tap into there. But Crystal, do you have any ideas about in Niagara region what happens, or?
Yes. So I shared with you earlier a story where, I tried to make change. That was actually at a board level. And I believe that board had 14 members on that board. And I tapped out about half a term early than I was supposed to, just because I wasn't making that change. So I couldn't agree more with Juliette that at a board level, we need to start seeing more diversity, from that leadership level, not-for-profits, any type of organization. We need to certainly see that. But the challenge I see, and I'm just going to talk about Niagara, but the reality is this is probably applicable to many areas within Canada or even the Western world, is the people that come from a diverse background. These opportunities aren't even in front of them. They are not even in front of them to join a board. Until I started searching for it, wasn't in front of me. As soon as I started searching for it, there was hundreds in front of me. And so I think this goes back to diversity and inclusion, is we have to include these people from diverse backgrounds into this conversation. And I think it's actually the board's responsibility to make it. So one of the things I would challenge boards to do is, to your next event, bring people that that you believe are from a diverse background, that you believe it'll really help them as well as it'll really help you. Bring them to the table, and you might not know people from diverse backgrounds, and that'll be an eye opener. right? You might not know somebody with a disability. You might not know somebody with a different religious background. And that's those unconscious biases that start to just come to the forefront. Hey, we can't fix this problem overnight, my friends, right? This is not something that happened overnight. This is one by one, step by step, effort by effort, intention by intention. We can start to make that change. And so, so Juliet, I would challenge your current board of directors to bring some newness to the table. But I would also be very what's the word I'm looking for? Very centered on why we need diversity on the board. I think that's really important. Is we don't want to just tell people what to do or tell them that this is what we need, but why do we need it? How will it benefit the organization? What's in it for the greater picture? How does it align with your vision, your mission, your core values of an organization to have diverse perspectives? What's in it for everybody? What's in it for them to do that? So that's something that I would really encourage you to do. Showcase that in your next board meeting, and maybe take 2 slides in the presentation to really talk about it. We can't go in like a bull in a china shop. We have to go in, with really pointed and very strategic conversation ideas, because we're trying to get everybody on the same page here. And until they can see how they're going to be able to contribute and how it's going to benefit everybody, that's when change starts